Well, we really have two words here. So I'll start with the second, imagination. Often we think of imagination as something made up, mere fantasy. But in this book, imagination means how we see the world, the very nature of reality itself. So when we speak of a sacramental imagination, we're thinking about reality as double layered. There's the physical and material world, of course, the world we can see, hear, taste, touch, and smell. But there's also a spiritual world. Now, in a sacramental imagination, these two are bound together. In fact, a sacramental imagination understands the spiritual as primary. The spiritual holds and sustains the physical. If I were a Buddhist, for example, that spiritual reality would be nirvana. As a Christian, we name it as God, in particular, revealed in the person, life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. This book explores the radical implications of a Christian sacramental imagination. Well, to use those iconic words, Houston, we have a problem. You see, it's hard for modern people to imagine sacramentally. In a modern imagination, which really emerged from the 17th century and has now become dominant, the physical material world is primary. So the spiritual world is either cast off, and we find this in modern forms of atheism, or separated out. It becomes an add-on, something like afterlife insurance for people that need it. Here's the problem for Christians. The modern divide is devastating to a sacramental imagination. We become modern people living as Christians rather than Christians living in a modern world. This book aims to name this problem and suggest ways we tackle it through recovering our sacramental imagination. Well, I wrote this book out of a strong sense that we're living in a time of crisis, and I think many people share this. If we take the Christian churches at the moment, they are clearly facing crisis. And we've seen this especially with the institutional sexual abuse scandals in the last few decades. But society and politics looks like it's becoming more polarised and divided. And of course, the greatest crisis of all, a looming environmental disaster. This book attempts to offer something of a diagnosis. You see, these crises, I think, are symptomatic of that modern divide, a casting off of the spiritual. What looks like material concerns, in fact, reveals a deeper spiritual crisis. So how do we as Christians respond? By reimagining our world, by bringing to bear our rich sacramental imagination that reintegrates the physical and the spiritual. This book explores what this looks like in terms of church, society, and planet. Well, I hope any Christian who's concerned about Christianity's continuing role and place in our modern world might find this book interesting and timely. But I want to make two observations about an intended audience. First of all, I write as a Roman Catholic, and the term sacramental imagination sounds suspiciously Catholic. But in fact, you can't be a Christian at all without a sacramental imagination. So the book is written to all Christians, regardless of denomination. But I particularly addressed it to those working in the area of education and evangelization. So this is targeted to Christians working in schools, in churches and parishes, in Christian organizations, charitable or otherwise. In all these contexts, we need to be aware of and to continue recovering a sacramental imagination, so we might be effective in presenting faith today, the name of the series of which this book is a part. Well, are you up for a challenge? Not the challenge of reading this book. I hope you find it accessible, easy to read, and even stimulating. Rather, the book offers a challenge. What does authentic Christian living look like? I suggest it's a radical form of life. Why? Because we are called, each and every one of us, to be missionaries to the modern culture. Each and every Christian is called to bridge the divide between the physical and material world, between the spiritual and the physical world. In whatever context we find ourselves in, home, workplaces, schools, universities, what this book argues is that the task of authentic Christian living is to sacramentalize the modern world. Like Moses at the burning bush, which is a story and image I use constantly in the text, I hope this book will fire or ignite your sacramental imagination.